I welcome you all in this first video on Machine Design 1. So in this video I am going to cover the overview of subject, and this is the part 1 of overview of subject. So first of all, let us see the syllabus of Machine Design 1. So this is the unit number 1, Fundamentals of Machine Design and Design Against Static Load. So this unit number 1 has two parts. So part 1 is Fundamentals of Machine Design. This part 1 has no numerical part. So this is the content of this part 1. Procedure of machine design. Procedure of design of machine element. So remember that this procedure of machine design consists of the procedure or steps starting from the defining the specification of product to the final testing of prototype and finalizing the assembly drawings. But this design of machine element, it is the one of the sub step in the procedure of machine design. So this is the basic difference. This machine design is a broad steps involved in the machine design, and this second is the design of a machine element or of individual machine element. So this procedure of design of machine element is nothing but the one of the sub step of this procedure of machine design. Then the third article is types of loads. So before designing any components, you must know that which are the types of loads. For example, if you consider one example, shaft. So which type of load is there on shaft, that you must able to identify, and according to that you should be able to design that shaft. For example, spring. So which type of load it is subjected? If it is subjected to static load, then you have to design it as per the design criteria used for static load, and if it is subjected to some variable loads or impact loads, you have to use the different criteria. So you must be able to design for various types of loads. Then the next article is factor of safety. This is the most important article from this unit, and this factor of safety article we are going to use throughout the subject. So while studying this article, you must study this with care and with proper attention, because it is useful throughout the subject. Then we are going to study the selection of factor of safety. What are the factors that are useful while deciding the factor of safety? Then its significance, that is importance of factor of safety. Then the next article is theories of elastic failure. So this theories of elastic failure is actually required to predict the failure of any mechanical component, and we are going to study the applications of these theories of failure. Then the next article is selection of preferred sizes. This selection of preferred sizes is used, or it is required for manufacturer to decide the output capacity of its machine. For example, suppose one manufacturer manufacturing one motor, and he wants to manufacture with different capacities. For example, he wants to manufacture the motor from the capacity 1 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt. Then in between 1 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt, he cannot or he is not allowed to decide what capacities of motor he can manufacture. For example, if you want to manufacture from 1 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt, he cannot select this value, one motor of 1 kilowatt, second motor of 2 kilowatt, third motor of 3 kilowatt. Likewise, he cannot decide. So there is one standard rules are there, that is preferred sizes are already given, and by using this rule, that manufacturer has to decide the output capacities of motor. Okay, so he cannot design or manufacture the motor of every output capacity. So there are certain rules to decide the output capacity of machine. So while deciding it, these rules are very useful. Then the next part is design against static load. So this part has numerical treatment, and this is very important part from this unit. So it has three parts. First one is socket and pivot quarter joint, or we can simply we call it as a quarter joint. Next one is knuckle joint, and third one is a lever. So there are two types of numericals are there. One first based on lever loaded safety valve, which is used in boiler, and second one is a right angled bell crank lever. So the angle between two arms of bell crank is 90 degrees, so that's why it is called as a right angled bell crank lever. So this part 2 consists of numericals on these three parts, three components. Then let us go through the video of knuckle joint. Through this video you can able to identify the parts of knuckle joint.
Knuckle joint. Knuckle joint is used to connect two round rods whose axes intersect in the same plane. One rod end is made in the form of a fork. The other rod end is in the form of an eye. The eye end is assembled into the fork end and the holes are kept in alignment. The cylindrical pin that is used to fasten the fork end with the eye end is inserted into the hole. This pin has a taper hole at the lower end of the shank to carry the taper pin. A collar is placed at this end and the taper pin is driven to hold the collar with the cylindrical pin. The collar and taper pin prevents the cylindrical pin from getting removed out.
Similarly, go through this video of quarter joint. So you will be able to identify the parts in the quarter joint, and also by comparing the video of knuckle joint, you will be able to differentiate between knuckle joint and quarter joint. Now the third component from this part 2 is the bell crank lever, and I have shown here one application of bell crank lever, that is hand pump. So many of you might have seen this hand pump and its application. So this hand pump operates like this. So this is one metallic handle. At the end, free end, we have to apply the effort so that you can lift the water from the ground. This black color lever, it is pivoted at this point, and at this point this lever oscillates. So generally this lever is used to transfer the force. Now how the force is transferred here? So you are applying the effort at this free end, at this one end, you are applying the effort at this one end, and the load is lifted here. That means you are applying effort at another point, and look, it is transferred to the another part of this lever. So that means we can say that this lever is used to transfer the force or multiply the force. Same thing is shown in this picture. So this black color part is nothing but the lever. It is pivoted at this point, and also it pivot about this, oscillates about this point. So this is the lever, and at this free end we have to apply the effort so that we can lift this load in terms of water, so that we can lift the water from ground and we can use it. So this is nothing but the lever. It has two arms. The one arm is from this point to this point. This is called as load arm, and from this point to the point of effort is called as effort arm. So length of effort arm is greater than length of load arm. So we are going to study why this length is different, why this length of lever is short and why this length of lever is longer one. So answer of this question we have to get it from this article. Okay, so just right now you should remember that what is bell crank lever. So it is just lever used to transfer or multiply the force. Now the next unit is design against fluctuating loads. So this unit also consists of numerical treatment, and its units are, its contents are stress concentration, causes and remedies, fatigue failure, endurance limit, notch sensitivity, Goodman and Soderberg diagram, modified Goodman diagram, design for finite and infinite life under reversed and fluctuating stresses. This is the most important and critical part of this subject. If you able to identify, if you are able to understand the difference between static and fluctuating loads, so you can able to identify what changes are necessary while designing the component subjected to fluctuating loads. So I will not go into details of this content. So just I will explain you the difference between static and fluctuating load. So to understand the difference between static and fluctuating load, consider this example where in the first case the wire is subjected to static load. The tensile load is applied on the wire so that we can break the wire. And the stress and time, the graph is plotted between stress versus time. So as the load is static, so stress or load will remain same with respect to time, it will not change. Now you can easily understand that the load required to break this wire in the static load condition is more. The load required to break this wire under static condition is more. Okay, now if you compare the same wire and if you apply the load like this, if you apply the load like this, that means in one case you have to bend the wire like this, and in the second case you have to unbend the wire in this way. So in this procedure you are alternately bending and unbending the wire, and this is nothing but the fluctuating load. You are bending the wire in this way in the first case, and in the second case you are unbending the wire in this way. So what happens if you consider one point on the wire, then that point A on the top surface of this wire, now in this case it is subjected to tensile stress, and the same point when it is wire is unbent, that same point A is subjected to compressive stress. So surface stress, the stress on the surface is compressive in this case, and in this case the surface stress is tensile. So you can easily understand that in
case B, the stress is tensile at point A, and at point A, in the case C, the stress is compressive. That means the stress is varying from 0 to positive side of the stress, and positive stress is nothing but a tensile stress. Then again stress is becoming 0, and again the stress is getting negative, that is below this 0 axis. Below this 0 point, the stress is negative. So stress is first becomes positive, then again it becomes 0, again it becomes negative, again it becomes 0. So that means the stress is varying from tensile to compressive, and thus this case we can say that the wire is subjected to fluctuating load. You might have break this wire in this way by applying repeated bending and unbending, and with this application we can say that, or we can compare the load required to break the wire in static load and load required to break the wire under fluctuating load. So you can easily guess in which case the load required is less. So definitely load required to break the wire in this case is less, because here the type of stress or type of load is not stationary, not static, it is fluctuating. So the load required to break the wire is very less when the load is fluctuating load. And thus we can say that as compared to static loading condition, fluctuating loading condition is more dangerous from safety point of view, and the failure occurs at very low magnitude of fluctuating load as compared to magnitude of static load. So this is the difference between static and fluctuating load. Now let us go through the content of this unit 3, selection of belt. It also consists of numerical treatment. So here we are not going to find out the stresses, or we are not going to check the stresses in the belts. We are going to simply use the standard manufacturer's catalog. This catalog is provided by the manufacturers, and that's why it is called as standard manufacturer's catalog. So by using this manufacturing catalog, we are going to simply select the belt for given application. In the same procedure we are going to follow for the V belt. We are going to use the standard manufacturer's catalog for the selection of V belt. Remember that the standard manufacturer catalog for flat belt, that data will be different, and data for V belt in the catalog will be different for V belt. So also we can use the design data book for selection of flat and V belt, but we are not going to use this design data book because we are going to use the standard manufacturing catalog, manufacturer's catalog, which is provided by manufacturer. So just for the introduction, I will tell you what is this is a flat belt. This is a 4-ply leather belt. What is meant by ply? So if you observe this cross section of flat belt, it is rectangular, and you can see there are 4 layers of leather. So that's why it is called as 4-ply. Ply means layer. 4-ply or 4-layer leather belt. And in this flat belt, by using manufacturer's catalog, we are going to find out ultimately 3 parameters. We are going to find out the width of this cross section, that is distance between this point to this point, that is width of belt, we are going to find out. Then number of plies, that is number of layers of leather, and third, length of belt. The length of belt is the same procedure you have to follow that you have followed in the basic mechanical element, okay, in the chapter power transmission. This is the cross section of V belt. As this cross section is trapezoidal shape, so we call it as a V belt, and this is a rubber, and in this rubber we have load carrying cords of metals, and this is cover which covers the rubber and cords. So in this case of V belt, the parameters that we are going to determine at the end of problem are number of belts and length of belt. See, number of belt, if you observe the V belt, it consists of cone pulley, and on that cone pulley number of belts are mounted. That means if you are going to use the V belt, the single belt is not used, the more than one belts are used if you are using V belts, and thus the number of belt is very important parameter in case of V belt, and that we are going to determine by using standard manufacturer catalog. And also we are going to find out the length of belt. This length of belt, it has some different procedure as compared to length of flat belt, and that we are going to discuss in this chapter. This is the end of this first overview of subject first part. So if you have any query, please mention in the comment section.